You're listening to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast.
Hi there. Welcome to the Classic Gamers Guild podcast. I'm your host, Anna. I'm here with your other host, Paul, and we're here with a special guest, the founder of Common Colors and the creator of Prim, a pretty darn cool point-and-click adventure about Death's Daughter that is up in Kickstarter right now, guys, and is already past its initial goal that it beat in less than 1 day, and it's on its way to getting its biggest stretch goal, which is bigger and longer game. I am so pleased to introduce to you Jonas Fisch. Hi there, how are you doing?
Hi Anna, I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the kind words about my game.
Well, it's a great game. I was excited to download the demo as soon as it came out. We featured Jonas's game in a ladies' night for the Classic Gamers Guild podcast and had a chance to get to learn a little bit about the plot and mess around with it a little bit by playing Mad Libs. So it was great fun to be able to finally download it and play it. It's a beautiful game. What ended up helping you to decide that you wanted it to be in black and white?
Basically, the artist that coined the game style, I stumbled across a Mexican comic artist called Oscar Alvarado, and I fell in love with his unique style. I mean, he's basically quite obviously drawn inspiration from works of Tim Burton while drawing. Just look at those big eyes of his characters, and he almost exclusively draws in black and white, and I've just fell in love with that style. And before that I came up with the idea of making a game about Death's Daughter, which is supposed to be creepy and cute at the same time. This style was the perfect fit for the plan I had in mind. And so I asked him, and he designed the characters. And from then on, we kept going, and we just never thought about adding color. I mean, if you make a game in black and white, it's quite obvious that from time to time there is a person approaching you and asking you, why don't you add color? Maybe for the Land of the Living, for example, when Prim enters the Land of the Living, this might be an obvious design choice. But up until this point, I have resisted the temptation to do so, and I'm quite happy about it because the look is unique.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely helps it stand out from the crowd. I was kind of wondering, on a developmental standpoint, have you faced certain challenges, specifically with perhaps like objects, things that you want the player to find or pick up or interact with? Has it been a bit of a challenge sometimes to differentiate what the player should interact with because it's black and white?
Yeah, we have introduced a quite useful tool the player can use, which is a hotspot display in-game. But watching people play the game in the demo, I've already encountered an issue that these hotspot highlighters are a little small sometimes. This is something that I'm going to fix in the final game, because you're right, due to the aesthetics, the black and white graphics, it's sometimes harder to spot an item. An example would be in the demo, the player's objective is to get keys that Thanatos, Prim's father, Death himself, keeps tied to his belt. And the keys are pretty dark, and his coat is dark as well, and so they are pretty hard to spot. And this is something that I'm definitely going to improve. But they are also, the black and white aesthetics are also good for a bit of joking around with, because at another point in the demo, we have Prim opening a book on herbology, and the player has to decide, okay, what color is the blossom? And the colors that the player is given as a choice are, of course, white, black, and gray. And this is always a good joke for players.
I noticed an inclusion of a lot of puns right away. It hit me that this was the kind of game I would be into.
Yeah, I really enjoy that too. And I think the black and white factor is actually quite nice, because one thing I don't like with traditional adventure games is sometimes, and you might recall this, Jonas, where some games, the item in the room that you're supposed to pick up is very obviously a different hue or saturation or brightness to every other color. So you walk into a room and you're like, oh, there's the object I obviously need to get. And that can take a little bit of fun out of it. So I think it's kind of neat that because everything's in a monochrome black and white sort of aesthetic. You don't have to walk into a room and see immediately the one thing you're supposed to click on because it looks brighter and different than the rest of the puzzle or rest of the background.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act that you have to do. You don't have to be, or you must not be unfair to the player. So it has to be, all the objects have to be traceable and findable for the players in some way. And I do enjoy a good piece of pixel hunting sometimes, but there is a limit, of course, and I think most players won't be that patient. And I will definitely have in mind that all the objects are visible well, but on the other hand, I agree with you. The black and white graphics give us a chance to maybe hide things a little better than usual.
It's good to find that middle zone. I remember back playing some of the old point-and-click games, I would just get to the point where I would just click every single square into the screen because, of course, there was no hotspot highlighter and figure out what was going on. And at that point, are you really playing a game or are you just clicking randomly on a screen? So I like the middle point between the two for sure. Definitely.
So, Jonas, what is your background with adventure games? What are some of the games that inspired you growing up to play and what got you into making your own games?
When I was a kid, my uncle came to our house and he brought me a CD-ROM including Day of the Tentacle. And that was the game that got me started on the genre, basically. I fell in love with the quirkiness of the characters, with the way of telling a story through these interactive mechanics. It's a special game. Up until this point, I have seldomly seen a game where the game mechanics, basically these time travel mechanics, are so well implemented into the story and work so well. This is why a few days ago basically was the best day in my life when Tim Schafer gave me a thumbs up on Twitter and said my game had good animations and he liked it.
Wow. Oh, yeah, so congratulations.
Yeah, and I thought I could die right now. This would be okay. And basically after Day of the Tentacle, I must say I'm rather the LucasArts kind of person. I'm not really the Sierra kind of person because I enjoy freedom and exploration and not being afraid of dying or running into dead ends. And I've never been a big fan of text parsers, to be honest. But these games, these LucasArts games, are the games that coined my childhood and coined me for life, actually. And I mean, in recent years, we have seen some kind of, I might be careful to call it like that, but a renaissance of adventure gaming because of great publishers and developers like Watch It Eye, for example, with excellent modern pixel art games that are nostalgic and fresh at once. And this was basically the reason for me to, a couple years ago, to say to myself, I want to create something like that as well. I haven't studied being a programmer or something like that. I'm actually a teacher. That's my real life job. And a couple of years ago, in 2016, I decided I want to make a short game. And I did this in the context of Adventure Jam, which is an annual event on Game Jolt. And it's a game jam, so everyone who wants to take part is given 2 weeks to create something small, but it has to be a point-and-click adventure or something at least similar to this. And I didn't know how to draw and I didn't know how to code, so I came across the Visionaire Studio, which is a game engine especially made for creating adventure games. And this is basically the engine I stuck with until now, and found a pixel artist to work with. This is also the reason why my company is called Common Colors, because that pixel artist came from Belgium, and the Belgium flag has the same colors in it as the German flag, so we came up with Common Colors. And from then on, I took part in that jam every year. I always had great feedback on the games, and this feedback motivated me to keep going. And in 2018, after my third jam entry, I decided I want to do something big, and this big thing was Prim.
And about to get bigger. I think you're just a couple of thousand off of your biggest stretch goal on the game.
Yeah, right. I still cannot believe it, to be honest. I'm still overwhelmed by people backing my game. I would have never expected something like that. I mean, I had the feeling this could be good, and I might get funded, but this totally surprised me.
Yeah, it must be so nice because you go live on Kickstarter and you're probably telling yourself, okay, it's going to be a long couple of weeks of refreshing the page and just hoping that we get to that point where it's fully backed and kickstarted. And for you, I imagine it was just a matter of finally succumbing to a night's sleep and waking up the next day and it's done. It's backed.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
It's totally not the way I expected it to be. I actually expected it exactly in the way you just described. I thought, like you said, refreshing the page all over again every 5 minutes. I already made invisible contracts with myself not to do that, and tried to avoid too much stress, and came up with countless strategies. What do I do if people don't see my campaign page? How do I get them on my campaign page? The very first backers, we got funded in 22 hours, and the very first backers were the people that I brought to the campaign page because I had a following. And how big that following actually was, I didn't realize until I hit the launch button, actually. I knew that there were a couple of people that were interested in my game, and I actually made a lot of friends in recent months promoting the game, and it really didn't feel like promoting it. It felt like hanging out online and meeting like-minded people. That's what it felt like. So I kind of expected these regulars to be there on day one, but as you said, waking up and finding out, okay, we're almost there was incredible.
You must have had to do some funding yourself beforehand. Even just you have a full orchestral soundtrack in this game. That doesn't come free, does it?
Yeah, right. But the orchestral soundtrack that you hear is actually very well made in a digital way. In the final game, we will leave that open to maybe mix it up with real instruments. But the sounds you hear on the demo are actually very well done in a digital way by our great musician, Brian Atkinson.
Oh, he's great. It is. It's beautiful. It hits you as soon as the intro starts.
Yeah.
Also the intro, which is just gorgeous. And then the music hits you. It feels like it's just really bringing you right into the game right away.
Yeah, he's amazing. Of course, when we talked about what kind of mood or what kind of style do we want regarding the music, the obvious choice was to let us be inspired by Danny Elfman, since he's basically the regular composer in Tim Burton movies, and he's always bringing big choirs to the game and always having these big orchestral soundtracks. And this was one direction we wanted to go, but there's actually another piece of music in the demo, which is the funky song that Death dances to later on. And I'm quite proud because I recorded this one and I play guitar on this one. And this is also very cool.
Oh, that's amazing. You know, I think one thing I absolutely love about your game, mate, is the first impression. You know, when you fire up that demo, you've got just amazing, wondrous visuals. The black and white is just absolutely refreshing. There's a beautiful contrast. The lines are clean. The lines are also kind of bendy in a great way, and in a very Day of the Tentacle sort of way. Again, just very wondrous. And then you get hit with the sound, the soundtrack, the score, which is gorgeous, and then the voice acting is magnificent.
Thank you so much. This is all due to the amazing Maria Pandolino, who does a great job giving Prim the sassiness that this character requires, and yet she somehow manages to stay very likable and very. Yeah. Some players told me, your game is fun because I always want to hear what Prim says about an object when I click it. And This is basically the biggest compliment a writer and a voice actress can get when writing an adventure game, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I would second that notion. It was addicting because she's just so animated and full of life and enthusiasm and personality. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The personality comes through the first two lines you hear her say. You've got a grasp on what her character is like. So it's, the first impression of your game is second to none. It really hooks you right away. So I suppose combining that with the knowledge of how well the Kickstarter did, I'm kind of not surprised, because the first impression is that remarkable.
Thank you so much, Paul. In fact, we already got very amazing player feedback regarding this live being live or being alive aspect that you mentioned, because the voice acting brings so much life to the character, and sometimes her face does not, because she's kind of frozen in the same facial expression, and this is something that we want to change in the final game, and that really caught our interest because of player feedback. That we want to give her different expressions in terms of moods. If she's in a good mood, then she might smile while talking, and so on. So this player feedback, again, has been very valuable to make the game even better. But all in all, thank you so much for all the praise that you let rain down on me right now.
Well, I got to throw in a little bit more. I mean, there's a few things that I haven't encountered as much in other games. For one, I like how she kind of narrates her own adventure. I also really enjoy the way that you have the mouse wheel set up for inventory.
Yeah.
That's a great way to interact the game. It feels so natural. Like, I don't need to put a lot of effort into a game. I can put all of my effort into enjoying the atmosphere and into problem solving, which is where I want it to be. So where did you come up with some of those ideas? Just in the stylization of how the control function worked with the mouse wheel and the inventory?
I mean, it's a point-and-click adventure, and I think one of the main advantages of the genre, apart from many disadvantages that it has in comparison to other more popular genres nowadays, maybe, is that the controls are supposed to be really simple, and that's basically a good thing. You don't need a lot of tutorials to explain the players what to do. You can really start playing with just understanding, okay, click left, interact, click right, look at, and open inventory, close inventory, that's it. And I think you can, of course, by design, make it even more comfortable for the player. And I wanted to make it play entirely with the mouse, of course, and the mouse wheel seemed to be the obvious choice. There are actually some games, especially from the German developer Dedelic. These are the ones that made the Deponia series, for example. They already introduced the mouse wheel as the device to open the inventory with. So we are the first to do that. But I think this is one of the most elegant choices. There are some people who play it with the mouse pad and not with the mouse, and those can press the I key on the keyboard and thereby opening and closing the inventory. That's also possible. But all in all, I think it's very comfortable to play, but still, there is some room for improvement. It's a tiny detail, but when you move your item that you picked up in your inventory and you move it outside of the inventory, then it is supposed to be closing automatically, but it does not right now. So this is another...
Yeah, we have to click.
Yeah, right. And this is basically one click too much. So we can make it even more comfortable right now after watching hundreds of people playing it, actually.
Right.
Oh, great.
I really like what I'm hearing from you, just in fact, and as far as when you're describing your game, and granted you're here to promote it, you're still taking a time out to mention things that you would like to see done better, and that's incredible. I think that's really admirable, and I think it speaks to everybody listening that this game is being made by somebody who's very, very passionate, perhaps a little bit of a perfectionist in a great way, and they know they're going to get a really quality product, because when you bring up things about your game, you're not afraid to say, well, I'd really like to see this done better. So I think that's really nice for the listeners and the backers and potential backers and buyers of your game to hear, the lead on the project is not going to be content until every little detail is ironed out and as smooth and nice as possible.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because because of my perfectionism, as you called it, and I think you're quite right with that term. I tend to polish things very much, and this is probably the reason why that demo already feels quite polished, especially for a demo. On the other hand, it's also, for me as a person, it's sometimes really hard, because until you reach that level of polishing that you intend, it's a long way to go. But of course, as you say, I want backers to know, and basically everyone, I want everyone to know that this is something I'm really serious about, making it as good as possible as I can.
And it looks like you've got quite the great team on your side. I'm reading up about Steffi Kick. It looks like she was working with Didactic Entertainment before.
Yeah,
I
right.
love their games.
Right. She's done background art and I think animations as well. So she's also a great addition to the team.
And how did you get your crew together? You've got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 of you at least all together, it looks like, on your base team?
Right. This highly depends on who we're talking about. Some of them, like my background artist Sasha and my composer Brian, I've known for a while now, and they've also worked with me on the Game Jam games that I've made, or at least on some of them. So these are actually long time colleagues when it comes to making games for me, and we're already pretty. We have already figured out how to work together well and how to get the workflow flowing in the best way possible. When it comes to the others, I think I just did my homework well. I conducted a lot of research, and when it came to the voice actress, I've listened to a lot of demo reels, and I've written a couple of emails, and I, in the end, wound up with the perfect team for my endeavor. So far, it worked out brilliantly, and I'm really happy with the people I get to work with. And in the best case, these colleagues become friends. And this is also what makes the process more fun.
Well, I mean, it's pretty cool coordinating all over the world with time zones and everything else. It's so much easier than it ever used to be. I mean, even look at us today. We're here. We're in the States. We're in Canada. We're in Germany, and the three of us can all get together and talk about games. And it's just such a great time to be in this genre.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, we all get used to digital communication more due to the current worldwide situation. And I think we all get even better at it because we have to.
Yeah.
I'm going to go backwards in time here a little bit. So you're a teacher, and are you doing that full time as well as doing the game design full time currently?
Yeah, that's right. I'm working full time as a teacher, and I've been doing that for since basically the beginning of the game, even longer. And I really like doing it. And I frequently get asked if I ever intended to quit my job as a teacher and work as a game developer full time. And I have to answer quite honestly that I think I'm not going to do that because I like being a teacher, and I also really enjoy the fact that I'm not financially dependent on selling games. This gives me the freedom, for example, to use all the money earned with Kickstarter to pay freelancers that I'm working with, because what I'm doing in the afternoons, in the evenings, at the weekends, during the holidays, is something that I enjoy doing and regard as of course it's more than a hobby because I founded a company and so on, but I thoroughly enjoy doing this. And it's perfectly okay for me if the first cent I'm earning with Prim is the first copy that is sold. I basically don't need the money because I have a job that pays the rent, and it takes a lot of pressure from my shoulders to have that. Yeah, but my job as a teacher, you have phases during a term where you have a lot of tests to correct, and there are also phases where you have more free time, and I can use these phases and the holidays to coordinate, to do my working load, to do my workload, and so far it worked out well. But of course, because I'm working with professionals and they are quite fast and they do this as their job.
Right.
So yeah, it's their full time. Now it looks like you are a high school philosophy teacher, which to me is pretty amazing. We don't have high school philosophy classes around here.
Yeah, German schools don't always have philosophy as well. It's a subject that students can choose, or they can choose different ones.
What a great elective. My dad got his degree in philosophy at the university, and then promptly became a postman. But, it comes in handy anyways.
Yeah. You never know when you need the knowledge.
Well, Jonas, what you had said about, keeping your job, I guess you could say, teaching. I think that's quite lovely because, as you said, it takes a lot of pressure off of your shoulders, and there is something nice, if not almost romanticized, about the notion that making games for you can remain a want instead of a need.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I feel about it. It's something I want to do, and nothing that I have to do to keep my private life and my family going. So I have a job that pays the rent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think from a consumer's point of view, that's one of the best things you could possibly hear. I mean, this person's pouring their heart and soul into something because they love it and because they want to. So I think any sort of labor of love, especially in the form of a game, is going to result in an experience that's a lot of fun for all of us.
Yeah, hopefully. That's the plan.
So have you told your students you're making a game? Do they know?
Some of them know, probably because there is a local newspaper that wrote an article about me recently. And my colleagues started to notice because, probably because of the same reason. And I've talked to some colleagues today, but normally I don't tell my students about this because I don't want to give too much away about my private life, and I try to be as professional as I can. In some interviews, I was asked, or these people told me, okay, of course you have a lot of backers at Kickstarter, you know a lot of people, you know a lot of students. And I always say I would never dare to ask my students to back my game because I'm simply not allowed to do that. I would totally abuse my position as a teacher if I did that. So I try to keep the two things quite separate from each other. Yet sometimes there are students who are interested in me as a person, and when they ask me something directly, I don't lie to them. I just tell them what I'm doing, and sometimes they get interested. There were a couple of students in the past that I showed my Game Jam games to, for example, because they just got interested. And I'm, of course, not ashamed of what I'm doing. I think it's pretty cool. And sometimes they think it's cool as well. As cool as a teacher can be, I mean.
Yeah, good point.
It might be rather curious, perhaps this time next year or the year after, once the game's out and accessible on Steam and things like that, to see if any of your students actually play the game and come into school and talk to you about it.
That would be cool. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. Well, I've got a premature question for you. Just something I'm just curious about, and I'm guessing you've probably spent at least a few moments thinking about it. Again, it's very premature, but have you thought at all about sequels? And if you have, would you be inclined to continue this game story, without spoilers, of course? Would you be inclined to continue this game story, or would you venture into something fresh?
When I started thinking about the concept for the game, I started with, actually, I've told this story a couple of times already, but I'm going to tell it again. The thing that inspired me, that gave me the initial spark of writing about this story, was a song that we all know. It goes like this. Everybody loves somebody sometimes. We all know it, and I listened to the version sung by Frank Sinatra. And I came up with the idea, if everybody loves somebody sometimes, what if death loved somebody? The personification of death. Oh. And what if this somebody was his daughter? And this was the idea. And from this idea, I jotted down a couple of storylines that I found interesting. And I actually ended up with 3 of them, and had to decide, because I wanted to keep things as narrow as possible and as focused as possible. And so I have at least 2 more storylines that intrigued me in the first place. So there are more stories to tell in Prim's universe, of course. So this would be one thing that might speak in favor of a sequel. But the answer that I have to give is only time will tell, because I don't know where I will be in my life after the game releases and what kind of release we will have, if it's going to be successful. And I will only be able to answer this question then, also because I don't know how much of project fatigue I'm going to feel then. I mean, right. Prim is a project that has kept me going for years already, but and I hope it will do so in the future, but in 2 years' time, maybe I will feel the strong urge to make my second game, if I'm going to make one, about something entirely different, because I just can't see black and white then.
Interesting. Well, okay, so you have ideas potentially for other ones, maybe when and if in the future, but how about now in Kickstarter? If you get your full funding to make more game, what is more game?
Yeah, more game basically consists of something that happens in the main act. The game, as it's supposed to be, has 3 acts, and the main act, the second act, has obstacles, of course, that are in the way of our heroine. And I have designed puzzles for a number of obstacles, but one puzzle chain was optional so far. So there's basically one whole story in that second act that might be played or might not, and it can also be left out because it's not necessary, but it's pretty cool, I think. And this is the more game option that backers might be able to unlock.
That's pretty awesome.
Yes, very close.
So yeah, okay, so you're looking at pretty much releasing this game internationally. It looks like now you've got most voice going for most of it too, but you've got English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, Russian, Brazilian, Portuguese. How do you get texts in all of those languages and make sure it's actually accurately represented? Because Google Translate just going to spit out something that doesn't make sense.
It's time for some unpaid advertisement right now. I'm working together with a group of people that call themselves the Warlocks, but spelled with just a C. So not what you think. These people are incredible. They actually, I found them because one of them who translate into German, who I don't know, who I don't need actually, because I translate into German myself. But their German translator is Michael Stein, and he's the editor-in-chief of the German adventure game magazine Adventure Treff. And I met him at Gamescom 2 years ago, and we started talking, and he basically offered me that they could do the localization for the demo. And what I've experienced working with these guys is their perfectionism, actually, because they took so much time talking to me about what the characters are like, how certain lines are meant precisely, how we could transfer one bad pun, and there are a lot of bad puns to another language, and they took so much care. I mean, the Russian translator, he even created a Russian font, because of course we need a new alphabet, and he liked the font we were using, but we didn't find a cool Russian font that we could use, so he just created one. And all this love and care that they put into the project almost matched mine, which is nearly impossible. And so I'm pretty determined to work with those guys again, because they are simply great and lovely people as well. And so far, actually, I've got so much cool feedback regarding the translations. There were many Spanish-speaking people, French-speaking people, Italian-speaking people who really had nothing but praise for the translation. And I mean, I can tell, to be honest, I don't speak. I speak a little bit of French, but that's all I remember from having French at school. So I can't really tell if the translations are well done, but what tells me is the players' reaction, and so far they have been phenomenal.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, it's really nice. It is a lovely community, the adventure indie community, very very supportive, like-minded people, as you mentioned. Mate, I'm curious, from the writing standpoint, you had mentioned a few moments ago about a puzzle that you were excited for that could perhaps be in the extended version of the game if you get to that goal, which everyone listening, please go Kickstarter. He's really close to that final goal. That being said, as far as writing is concerned, I'm just kind of curious your mindsets behind the difference between the story and the puzzles. Do you find yourself more... Do you enjoy writing the puzzles more than the story, or vice versa? Or did you kind of go into this writing a story and had this moment where you're like, oh God, I got to figure out how to do puzzles? How's that all play out for you as a creator?
I think it's important when you write games. I mean, in a film, you would say show, don't tell. In a game, you would say play, don't tell. So basically, the player playing is supposed to be the story. This is, I think, one of the most important things, because it shouldn't feel like interactive fiction too much. It should feel like you are in control of that story. And you can only achieve this by having puzzles and story intertwined. When I'm designing puzzles, I always design the world first. So I had a basic storyline. I knew what my milestones within the stories or the story would be. And from then on, I started designing the world around this story and the characters, and came up with, okay, what kind of hobbies have they got? What kind of places do they live in? And from that point on, after having designed the world, I came up with puzzles that made sense in that world. For example, take Thanatos. Thanatos, he's Prim's dad, he's death, but he's also a big fan of music. You clearly sense this when you enter his room. I mean, there's an old-fashioned record player. There are countless records on his bookshelf. There is a golden or a silver record in his case, or a gray record. There is a scythe banjo. So there are countless. There's evidence that he's a big fan of music. So it was natural to place a radio in the middle of that room and to make that radio part of the puzzle. And I tried to take that route for the rest of the puzzles too. I tried to make the puzzles fit in with the world that they are existing in. And when it comes to experiencing the story, I think games are, especially adventure games, are story machines. So basically, the player interacting with the game is a device of telling stories. And the cool thing about a game like Prim, where you enter a world that is so different from ours, is that it's really cool to let the player experience so many stories. I mean, every character that Prim meets basically has his or her own story to tell, or a quest to give her. And in the end, the game consists of countless stories, actually, that are all part of this world. And so there's this overall story structure that I try to tell, but there are very many other stories. Characters who fall in love with each other, characters who need help or who are arrogant or whatever. So I try to tell a lot of stories, actually. And all this by having the player interact with the things that he can interact with.
Yeah, I'm guessing that there's going to be other characters introduced later on, of course, and you're going to have a chance to take control of some of them as well as the gameplay goes on. I really like that idea.
Thank you, Anna.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So how did you come up with the idea for the ant being the goddess of violent death? That's a pretty cool one.
Yeah. It's Thanatos' sister, and this basically derives from Greek mythology. This is an influence that is not so clearly visible in the demo as it will be in the full game, but many of the people or creatures that Prim is going to encounter in the game are loosely based on characters that appear in Greek mythology. Thanatos, the father, for example, is the god of peaceful death, and I just like the idea of having Prim's aunt, Charis, as a contrast to him as the goddess of violent death. So both seem to have completely different motivations when it comes to transporting souls from one world to the other. And of course, this offers a lot of potential for conflicts and for interesting dialogues between those two. What I can give away is that Charis somehow serves the stereotype of the cool auntie, whereas Thanatos is the dad that can't let go, and Charis's relationship to Prim seems to be better at first because she is much more loose when it comes to raising a kid.
Right.
I mean, it's always easier when you're the aunt and not the mother or the father.
That's so lovely. I just love the whole concept of the story in the game. We're working in a somewhat typical, if not healthy, family dynamic when the family itself is the bringers of death.
Yeah, right.
It's a great idea.
I mean, we all have we all have our professional life and our private life, and sometimes people have cruel jobs to do, and when they get home, they are mom and dad.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I love it. So for my last question for you, mate, honestly, I've got quite a bit more, but I'll limit it to one, and then I'll just harass you on Twitter later. But for now, I have probably a foolish, if not rhetorical question, but I think it has to be asked, and that is your feelings about Tim Burton himself. You know, for you, I think most of us are fans. That's safe to say. Would you consider yourself a fan of his, or is it more on like an kind of obsessive, fandom sort of side? Basically, how do you feel about Tim Burton and his work, and how did it inspire this game more than what's, I guess, obvious?
Mm-hmm. I would not call myself a fanatic of in any way, actually, especially not of himself as a person. What I really do adore, on the other hand, is his distinctive art style that he coined and the way that it's working on screen. And this is the feeling that I wanted to create. What I love about his work is that he's able to create really dark Gothic fiction with a heart. And that's basically the contrast that I wanted to see in a game, and I wanted to make that game. I mean, take films like A Nightmare Before Christmas or Corpse Bride. These are, when you just look at screenshots or you have a random scene without any context, it might scare you, especially when you're a child. And the interesting thing is that it's still very family friendly. I mean, when I watched Nightmare Before Christmas, I was about 6 or 7 years old, probably too young actually to watch it, and I had nightmares for weeks after it. But it fascinated me so much that I had to rewatch it again and again until my nightmares disappeared and became, obsession might be the wrong word, but I developed a fascination for that type of visual storytelling. And that's basically what I admire. I admire the way of telling emotional stories with really, how do I put it? With frightening imagery.
Yeah, there's quite a contrast there. It's not something you experience with a lot of other creators as you would with Tim Burton, but it's a great way to put it. I think a lot of people have a split opinion on like The Nightmare Before Christmas. If you saw it before puberty, you might have been scared of it, and if you saw it after, you might find it funny, which is a difficult place to land. It's nice.
My question I have for you before we wrap it up, what is the time period this game is set in? It's like there's a bit of the Greek mythology, there's a little bit of like the Gothic age, but you've got things like record players. So is it an imaginary time period? Or?
Yeah. This is, I think, part of what makes that mixture interesting. When you hear Greek mythology, of course, you think of ancient Greece, but it's obviously not set in ancient Greece. We try to do something really new here, and we offer the players a peek into, and this becomes very visible when you visit the land of the living, actually, which looks a little bit like our 19th century, but it also becomes quite clear that it isn't our world. It's a world very similar to ours, but it is not. So it's like an alternative history, 19th century, Victorian age, with elements that aren't supposed to be there. And this is something that I find very interesting.
It's kind of like taking it into steampunk, but a completely different genre, because steampunk is kind of timeless in that it's then, it's now, it's a few different times all at once.
Yeah, right. But there are actually a few steampunky elements in the game.
Yeah, that's true. Sort of like that mix of modern and old-fashioned, but with that gimmicky kind of machinery and stuff, right?
Yeah, right. When you look very closely, for example, I already revealed a character named Tristan. He's going to be one of the playable characters in the game, and he's going to be a human. Followers who looked very closely noticed that he has some strange technical device tacked to his temple. And we don't know yet what this is about. But this is clearly an element that doesn't fit the picture of 19th century.
Oh, I love that. And that's what it is. It had me guessing as I'm playing it. When is this? I mean, and you kind of know where it is, but it's in a place where you don't usually see games situated. So there's so much to discover as you play through it, even just in the demo, that I highly recommend everybody listening. They got to go out there. It's on itch. It's on Steam. get this demo downloaded. It's certainly worth it. Back it on Kickstarter. Jonas, could you tell me a little bit about what you want people to know about the campaign?
You said so much, Anna, already. Let me try to add something. Yeah, folks, Prim is on Kickstarter right now. At the moment of recording this, we still have about 14 days to go, but when you are listening to this podcast, it will probably be less. So time is running out, and we are still hoping to reach our, for now, at least last stretch goal, because I'm going to release some new stretch goals on Friday. We came up with new cool ideas what we can offer if we get even higher. And so we're still hoping to collect more money to make this game even great as we can for you guys. So if you are into point-and-click adventure games and into dark aesthetics, but also very emotional stories that are told with a bit of humor and good heart, then check it out.
Well, you're with the right audience. Our audience they're big fans of that kind of humor, puns in particular. If you've got a pun that can make somebody get up, shake their head, and walk out of a room, you've got a winner.
I never thought that our Swiss Army scythe would have so many fans.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a real pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again. It would be great if you'd come back on when the game is released, and we can talk a little bit more about the final details and more about the game. It's been a lot of fun.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonas. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Like I said, I'll harass you on Twitter as the time goes on. And yes, we would love to have you back when the game comes out so we can talk about it more and yeah, just lavish praise on it, because I'm already in love with the demo. So that is all the bloody time we've got for today, unfortunately. I want to thank Jonas again so much for being with us. Please go back his game. You can find him pretty easily if you just go to www.prim-game.com. Is that a dash or a slash? I guess that's a dash,
right?
It's a dash. Yeah, it's not the guitarist for Guns N' Roses, it's a dash. So go to prim-game.com. You can get all your information there. You can follow him on Twitter, but most importantly, please back the game. Back it selfishly, not even for the goals. Back it because it's a wonderful game that you'll want to play. So that's about all we've got for today. If you want to check out the Classic Gamers Guild, we are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. I've done over 100 episodes, and I still have to look at a cheat sheet for all this information. Let's see. Instagram at CGG Podcast. Do us a tweet over at Twitter at the CG Guild. You can send us an email at mail@classicgamersguild. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons. We sincerely appreciate you guys for making this happen. To those on our extra special thanks tier, Jay Holmes and Mark Fillion, thank you so much for being there for us, as well as everybody else. And yeah, that's all the time we got. Please back Prim and don't do a murder.
Good advice.